Welcome to a video on working with React class components, props, and event handling. After watching this video, you will be able to define a class component, describe how a class component works, describe how to manage the state in the React class component, describe how to use props in a class component in React, describe how to handle events in class components. A class component in React is a JavaScript class that extends the React.component from the React library. Class components were the primary way of defining components in React before introducing hooks. They encapsulate UI components and their behavior into reusable building blocks. Class components are defined using ES6 class syntax, and they manage states, handle lifecycle events, and define component methods within the class. Let's look at a basic example of a class component. In the class component, you first write import statements. Import React, component from React. This statement imports React and the component class from the React package. React is the core library for building UI components in React applications, and component is a base class from which React class components are created. Next, you declare the class, and the class myComponent extends component provided by React. This statement means myComponent is now a React class component, inheriting all the functionality provided by the component class. Then, you use the render method within the myComponent class. This method is required in every class component and is responsible for returning the JSX React elements that represent the UI of the component. In this case, it returns a div tag containing an h1 element with the text "Hello World." JSX allows you to write HTML-like syntax directly within JavaScript code. The final statement is the export statement with the export default myComponent. This statement exports the myComponent class as the default export from this file. It allows other files in the project to import and use myComponent by importing it using import myComponent from myComponent. State management is a crucial aspect of React class components. State represents the data the component needs to render and respond to user interactions. You can initialize the state in the constructor using this.state and update it using this.setState. You can manage the state in a class component as shown in the code. The code defines a class named EmployeeDetails that extends the component class provided by React. In the constructor, the component initializes its state with two properties, empID and empEmail, both set to empty strings. This initial state represents the initial values for the input fields, where users can enter their employee ID and email. The component defines a method named handleInputChange to handle changes in the input fields. This method is triggered whenever a change event occurs in the input fields. When the input changes, the method extracts the name and value from the event target, input field, where the name corresponds to the state property to be updated, empID or empEmail, and the value corresponds to the new value entered by the user. It then updates the component state by calling this.setState with an object containing the updated property and its new value. React automatically merges this object with the current state, updating only the specified property while keeping other properties unchanged. The render method delivers the component based on its current state. It dynamically binds the value attribute of the input fields to the corresponding state properties, empID and empEmail. This binding ensures the input fields display the current values stored in the component state. When the user interacts with the input fields, the displayed values update in real time as the state changes. When the Show Details button is clicked, an alert is triggered, displaying the current values of empID and empEmail. The alert directly accesses the state properties empID and empEmail to display their values. Since React manages the state, it ensures that the displayed values are always up to date with the current state. In React, props or properties send data from parent to child components. The child component receives the data from the parent component and can use it. The props thus received by the child component are read-only and unchangeable. They can also pass methods or functions from parent to child components. Let's look at a code example. The parent component is organizationdetails.jsx. Within the JSX, the prop value of employee designation is declared within the class component and is passed to the employee details component as an attribute. The value of employee designation, project manager, is passed as the value of the prop. Let's look at how the child class, employee details, can access the data from the parent class, organization details. In the code, the employee designation prop is accessed within the employee details component by destructuring it from this .props in the render method, as shown in the code. This method allows the child class to access the employee designation prop passed from its parent class, organization details. In the JSX, the employee designation is concatenated with the other values EMP-ID and EMP-email. When clicking the Show Details button, an alert is triggered, displaying the values of EMP-ID and EMP-email, and employee designation. Event handling in React is responding to user interactions, such as clicks, mouse over, mouse out, form submissions, and so on, within a React application. For example, event handling is done in the given code using the onClick property in JSX. An arrow function is called when clicking the Show Details button. The values of EMP-ID, EMP-email, and employee designation are used by this arrow function to create a warning message using template literals. This arrow code is run when the onClick attribute is set, showing the user alert message. This method lets you handle events directly in the JSX code, making adding user interactions to React components easier. In this video, you learn that a class component in React is a JavaScript class that extends the React.component class from the React library. Class components encapsulate UI components and their behavior into reusable building blocks. Class components manage state, handle lifecycle events, and define component methods. State represents the data the component needs to render and respond to user interactions. In React, props or properties send data from parent to child components. Event handling in React is the process of responding to user interactions, such as clicks, mouse over, mouse out, form submissions, and so on within a React application.